What is your worst experience with HOA? Write yours in the comments, but first let me tell you mine. I never thought I'd be one of those people posting about HOA drama, but here we are. When my wife and I bought this house 5 years ago, it was our dream home. A charming colonial with a wraparound porch in a quiet neighborhood. The HOA fees were reasonable, and the rules seemed normal enough. Keep your lawn maintained, no neon paint jobs, the usual stuff. For the first 4 years, everything was perfect. Our neighbors were friendly, the community pool was well maintained, and the HOA board mostly focused on organizing block parties and maintaining the common areas. I even volunteered to help with the annual holiday decorating contest. We were living the suburban dream. Then everything changed when our longtime HOA president, Bob, retired and moved to Florida. Bob was one of those rare HOA presidents who actually used common sense and focused on building community rather than enforcing petty rules. But the vacuum he left behind? That's when Karen swooped in. Now, when I say Karen, I mean Karen. Picture the most stereotypical power-tripping suburban dictator you can imagine, complete with the infamous haircut and a perpetual, "I need to speak to the manager" expression. She ran unopposed because, honestly, nobody else wanted the hassle of running the HOA. We all figured, how bad could it be? Within 2 months of Karen taking over, the community newsletter went from announcing potlucks and garage sales to publishing a weekly violation watch column, complete with passive-aggressive reminders about maintaining our property values. She even started doing what she called routine inspections, which basically meant walking around with a clipboard and taking pictures of people's houses like some kind of suburban secret police. So get this, I come home from work one day to find a notice stuck to my door. Not just casually placed, mind you, but practically stapled to the wood with one of those huge industrial clips that probably left a mark. A $500 fine for unauthorized modifications to the property exterior. What modifications, you ask? The driveway. The same driveway that came with the house when I bought it. The same driveway that had been there for 15 years before this HOA even existed. But wait, it gets better. The notice wasn't just a simple fine. It was a 3-page document, single-spaced, detailing every supposed violation. Karen had apparently spent what must have been hours photographing my driveway from every possible angle. There were close-up shots of the concrete, pictures taken at different times of day, and even some kind of color comparison chart held up against the surface. I'm not kidding. She'd created a whole detective board worth of evidence about my driveway's apparently offensive shade of gray. The notice even included a helpful timeline of when the violation was first observed, complete with timestamps of her drive-bys. Yes, she actually documented that she'd driven past my house 7 times in 3 days to verify the violation. Who has this kind of time on their hands? The best part? At the bottom of the notice was a handwritten note that read, "This type of blatant disregard for community standards will not be tolerated. Further violations may result in additional fines and/or legal action." She'd even drawn a little frowny face next to her signature. I wish I was making this up. My wife found me standing in the driveway about an hour later, just staring at the concrete like I was trying to decode the Da Vinci Code. "Maybe it's the lighting," she said, trying not to laugh. But I wasn't laughing. That $500 was supposed to go toward our anniversary trip next month. And the more I stood there, looking at this perfectly normal driveway that had apparently become the bane of Karen's existence, the more my blood started to boil. I immediately emailed the board asking for an explanation, trying to keep it professional despite my rising blood pressure. Their response? The driveway's color doesn't match the approved palette in the CC and Rs. I checked the documents. There was literally nothing about driveway colors. When I pointed this out, Karen, the board president, had the audacity to say they'd recently updated the rules. By recently, she meant last week, and they hadn't even properly notified residents. But here's where it gets interesting. I decided to attend the next HOA board meeting in person. You know those moments in life where you walk into a room and immediately feel like you've stepped into a bad community theater production? Yeah, it was like that. Picture this. The local community center's fluorescent-lit meeting room filled with exactly 7 folding chairs, because heaven forbid anyone else wants to attend, and Karen sitting at the head of the table with not 1, but 3 different gavels. Yes, you heard that right. 3 gavels. One was apparently decorative, one was ceremonial, and one was for actual use. I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried. I raised my hand politely when they opened the floor for resident comments. Karen's face immediately scrunched up like she'd bitten into a lemon. Yes, the resident from 1242 Maple with the non-compliant driveway, she said, making sure everyone could hear the disdain in her voice. I pulled out my copy of the original CC and Rs, the property documents from when I bought the house, and photos of every other driveway in the neighborhood. I'd like to discuss the recent fine I received, I started, keeping my voice steady. I've reviewed all the documents and I can't find any mention of approved driveway colors in the original CC and Rs. Karen's response was a masterclass in condescension. Well, she said, shuffling through a stack of papers like she was about to reveal the secrets of the universe. If you had attended our special emergency meeting last Tuesday at 2 p.m., you would know that we've implemented new community standards. A Tuesday afternoon emergency meeting about driveway colors? I asked. Was this properly noticed to all residents? The other board members suddenly became very interested in their shoes. Karen's face turned an impressive shade of red. We posted a notice on the bulletin board by the pool, she said, as if that made perfect sense. The closed pool? I asked. The one that's been closed for maintenance for the past 3 weeks? The silence in the room was deafening. One of the other board members, Tom, actually started to snicker before Karen shot him a death glare. Furthermore, I continued, pulling out my phone, I've documented 47 driveways in our community. Would you like to guess how many different shades of gray, beige, and concrete I counted? I started swiping through photos. By my count, we have at least 12 different colors, including Mrs. Peterson's driveway. You know, your best friend from the garden club? Funny how her driveway didn't receive a violation notice. That's when Karen made her fatal mistake. She stood up, slammed down her actual use gavel, not the ceremonial one, heaven forbid, and declared, "This meeting is not a forum for questioning the board's authority. The fine stands, and if you continue to be difficult, we'll be adding additional penalties for insubordination." Insubordination. She actually used the word insubordination, like this was some kind of military dictatorship run by the Homeowners Association of Petty Tyranny. Instead of paying the fine, I did something better. Way better. Remember how I mentioned I work in real estate development? Well, let's just say I know my way around property laws and have some friends in interesting places. I decided to go full nuclear, legally, of course. First step, I created a spreadsheet documenting every single HOA violation notice in our neighborhood for the past 6 months. Took me 2 weeks of going door to door, talking to neighbors and collecting evidence. Turns out Karen had been particularly busy with her fining spree. The interesting pattern? She'd never once issued a violation to anyone on the board or her immediate circle of friends. Funny how that works, right? But here's where it gets really good. Remember that recently updated rulebook? I sent copies to 3 different property lawyers, and they all came back with the same response. Laughing emojis followed by, "This is a goldmine of violations." Turns out, Karen and her board hadn't just bent the rules. They'd taken those rules, twisted them into a pretzel, and thrown them into a legal dumpster fire. The real smoking gun? I discovered they'd been keeping 2 sets of financial records. One for the residents to see, and another internal version. A friendly source, who shall remain anonymous, but may or may not be Karen's neighbor who got fined for having the wrong shade of beige curtains, slipped me some documents showing they'd been using fine money to fund their own board appreciation events, including a $2,000 emergency board meeting at a luxury spa resort 2 towns over. Now I could have gone straight to court, but where's the fun in that? Instead, I orchestrated what I like to call Operation HOA Freedom. Yes, I made t-shirts. They were a hit. Phase 1. I created a private Facebook group for affected residents. Within 48 hours, we had 85% of the neighborhood joined. Turns out everyone had a Karen story. Phase 2. I compiled a comprehensive legal brief with help from my lawyer friends. We're talking a 50-page document detailing every single violation of state HOA regulations, complete with color-coded exhibits and a timeline of their power abuse. Phase 3. I organized a town hall meeting, but here's the twist. I invited representatives from the State Housing Board, 3 local news stations, and a popular real estate blog. Karen and her board thought it was just another regular meeting where they could ignore resident complaints. The look on Karen's face when she walked into that community center and saw the news cameras? Priceless. Even better was her expression when I pulled out the projector and started my PowerPoint presentation titled, A Study in HOA Corruption, a 3-act tragedy. The coup de grace? I had invited several real estate attorneys to attend, who then offered free consultations to any resident who'd been illegally fined. The lineup of people wanting to talk to them wrapped around the building twice. By the end of that night, we had 157 signed affidavits from residents, documentary evidence of financial mismanagement, proof of selective enforcement, footage of Karen having a meltdown when confronted with evidence, a unanimous vote to remove the entire board. And yes, someone brought popcorn. The best part? Everything was done completely by the book. They couldn't even cry foul because we followed every single proper procedure. You know, the ones they should have been following all along. The aftermath of Operation HOA Freedom was better than anything I could have imagined. Remember that legal brief we put together? Turns out the State Housing Board had been looking for a test case to crack down on HOA abuse in our county. We basically gift-wrapped them the perfect example. The dominoes started falling within days. First, the board's attorney, Karen's cousin, naturally, mysteriously went on an extended vacation. Then their insurance company, after reviewing our evidence, declined to defend them against the mounting lawsuits. But the real cherry on top? Karen's husband, the treasurer, who'd never taken a single accounting class, suddenly remembered he had urgent business out of state. The emergency board meeting that followed was pure cinema. Picture this: a packed community center, 3 news crews, and Karen trying to maintain her composure while our lawyer methodically laid out their options. Immediate resignation of all board members. Reversal of all fines issued in the past year. Full financial audit and restitution of misused funds. Public apology to the community. Or, we could let the courts handle it. The look on Karen's face cycled through every human emotion known to mankind in about 30 seconds. She tried her usual tactics, crying, claiming persecution, even attempting to call an emergency recess, which nobody honored. But when our lawyer started passing out copies of the spa resort receipts, she finally cracked. The board resigned on the spot. All of them. But here's where it gets even better. Remember those board appreciation events? They had to pay back every single penny. We're talking about $23,457 in misused funds. The best part? They had to write individual checks because the HOA account had mysteriously been drained the week before. Spoiler alert. The money was found in a separate account under Karen's dog's name. Yes, really. The following week, we held new board elections. The turnout was unprecedented. 96% of homeowners showed up to vote. Karen, in a stunning display of either courage or complete lack of self-awareness, actually tried to run again. She gave a tearful speech about persecution and misunderstandings. The vote count? Karen received exactly 0 votes. Even her husband was seen marking his ballot for someone else. The new board? It's amazing what happens when you get people who actually care about the community. The first order of business was rewriting the HOA bylaws to prevent any future abuse. We now have term limits, transparent financial reporting, and a requirement that any new rules must be approved by 75% of homeowners. Remember my offensive gray driveway? The new board's first official act was to pass a resolution confirming that all existing structures were automatically grandfathered in. They even sent me a formal apology letter, which I had framed and hung in my garage. Right next to the infamous color comparison chart Karen had made. The final twist of the knife? Karen put her house up for sale 2 months later. Apparently living in a community where people point and whisper, "That's the HOA Karen. Everywhere you go isn't very comfortable." Last I heard, she moved to a non-HOA neighborhood. I guess some people can learn after all. It's been 8 months since the great HOA revolution. Yes, that's what we call it now. And honestly, our community has never been better. Remember those weekly violation notices? They've been replaced with an actually useful community newsletter that includes local events, maintenance tips, and a neighbor spotlight section celebrating people who help make our community better. The financial impact has been incredible. After the audit, we discovered that proper management of our HOA funds meant we could actually reduce monthly dues by 30% while increasing services. Turns out when you're not spending money on emergency board meetings at luxury spas, there's quite a bit left over for actual community improvements. We've implemented what we call the common sense framework for HOA governance. Every proposed rule has to pass 3 tests. Does it actually protect property values? Is it reasonably enforceable without being intrusive? Would a normal person consider it rational? The results speak for themselves. Our property values have actually increased more than similar neighborhoods in the area. Turns out, being known as that community that stood up to HOA abuse is pretty attractive to homebuyers. We've had 3 different local news stations do follow-up stories on our model HOA governance. The ripple effects have been fascinating to watch. 2 neighboring HOAs have already adopted our bylaws template. The state legislature is using our case as an example in proposed HOA reform laws. I've even been invited to speak at a property owners' rights conference next month. I'm thinking of opening with the driveway story. But the best part? The sense of community that's emerged. Remember those board appreciation events that used to cost thousands? We now have monthly community events that cost a fraction of the price, and everyone's actually invited. Last month's block party had a record turnout. Even better, we've started an annual Community Heroes Award for residents who go above and beyond to help neighbors. First recipient? The anonymous neighbor who leaked those financial documents. They finally came forward. It was Mrs. Johnson, the retired accountant from 2 streets over. Karen's old house finally sold, by the way. The new owners are a lovely couple who couldn't stop laughing when we told them the driveway story at the Welcome Barbecue. They've since joined our Community Events Committee and are helping organize our first annual Gray Driveway Pride Festival. Yes, that's a real thing we're doing. We're even making t-shirts. As for my driveway, still the same color, still breaking 0 actual rules. But now it's become something of a local landmark. People literally stop to take pictures with it. Someone even created a Facebook page called The Driveway That Launched a Revolution. It has more followers than our actual HOA page. The biggest lesson in all of this? Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about making things better. We turned a story about petty tyranny into one about community empowerment. And every time I park my car on that infamous gray driveway, I smile, knowing that sometimes fighting back isn't just about winning. It's about changing the game entirely. Outro. If you enjoyed this story of sweet, sweet HOA justice, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share your own HOA nightmare stories in the comments below. Hit that notification bell to catch more stories of HOA nightmares and the people who fought back. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is just making people follow their own rules.